Welcome to the Core Happiness Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Banks, a mindset and positive psychology coach. On this podcast, we discuss all things related to creating happiness from within. So, let's do it. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to have Cara Gruhala with us. Cara is the practice owner of Seeds of Change Counseling Consulting in Missouri. She is a licensed professional counselor and an adjunct faculty member at the University of Central Missouri. She specializes in family systems, neurodivergence, anxiety, trauma, body image, perinatal issues, and the autism spectrum. Her person-centered approach focuses on building trust, compassionate relationships, and helping clients uncover their own solutions. Cara utilizes various therapeutic methods, including cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused brief therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and play therapy. She is here today to discuss the mindset of dealing with daily stressors, navigating big life changes and transitions, and how we can recognize and manage anxiety. Cara, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to hear your insights and your experience. But first, I wanted to have you start by just explaining a little bit about your practice and the person-centered therapy and how you incorporate that into your practice.
Yeah. So I actually started my career as a counselor as a Missouri certified school counselor, working in multiple different elementary schools. I worked in urban core and then I worked in suburban elementary. And luckily, the program that I went through at the University of Central Missouri offered a very extensive play therapy training. And ironically, when I went into my degree program, I was going to work with only adults. I did not have kids of my own. I thought kids were just gigantic question mark. I didn't know what to do with them. And one of my supervisors at the university program said, I think you may not use it, but while you're here, why don't you just go ahead and take the first play therapy class? It's good information to have. Even if you don't use it, you can kind of if you see adult clients that are parents, you can kind of let them know what play therapy is about in case any of their children would ever need that and need to be referred. Took one and I was hooked. I thought it was amazing. It was magical. Ultimately, I was working in a completely different industry during the first part of my degree program, and it came time for me to do my internship. And I just thought, in taking care of myself, I wasn't going to be able to do 40 plus hours in a different industry and then also get my internship hours at evenings, weekends. It was going to be a lot. So Missouri, unfortunately, for a long time has been very low on school counselors. And so they allow people that are in their degree programs to come in as a school counselor and train. So long story short, play therapy just became part of who I was and part of how I communicate as a counselor. And I even like incorporating it with my older clients too.
That's pretty amazing. And for those who don't know, how would you explain play therapy?
Oh my gosh, yes. It is so misunderstood. What I will say play therapy is pulling out a checkers board and then trying to get somebody to talk while they're just playing checkers. So I do come from a very child-centered program, person-centered program, child-centered play therapy model. There are many different theoretic orientations of play therapy, but from the child-centered view that I work through, you are allowing the child a lot of choice. So you have multiple different groupings of toys. So you have aggressive toys, you have nurturing toys, you have building toys, you have messy play, you have all these different groups of toys available. And a child gets to enter the play therapy office and they get to choose. They get to decide if they want to use multiple items that day. And in the mentality that I use, I'm never directing a child to, we're going to use this tool today. Play therapy is one of the expressive therapies along with art therapy, music therapy, and drama therapy. Children's first language is play. So the work gets done through play. I often have to do a lot of explaining to parents at the very beginning. Your kid's going to come out of here and you're going to say, what'd you do with Cara today? What'd you talk about? And they're going to say, I don't know, we just played. And that is probably correct. And the work gets done through play. So as a play therapist, we are reflecting a lot. We're watching what the child's choosing. Let's say I'm working with a kid who is really struggling with separation anxiety and they are able to let their parent leave the play therapy office for 5 minutes. I'm going to first of all give them the choice of whether or not that happens that session. And then I'm going to, if they decide, yeah, my mom can go sit out front for 5 minutes, I'm going to say, gosh, you really had a choice there and you decided that it was okay for her. I'm going to be kind of reflecting on some of those things that I would like to see more of, or reflecting on something that a child's trying to communicate, following their play. And that sounds so basic. And for people that maybe don't truly understand play therapy, they may be like, okay, so how's my kid meeting their goals there? But it's really all about letting the child have agency and showing them that they have it within them, just like any kind of person-centered therapy. People have what they need within them. It's just the therapist's job to help them discover that.
Yeah. And so a person centered therapy approach completely makes sense with the play therapy, the way you described it. How does it work with an older person?
So I will say I am somewhat multimodal, but with that person-centered core, I'm going to do a really thorough intake with somebody. I'm going to be learning what their goals are, what they would like to change in their life. When I do an intake with clients, I am just explaining to them, this theoretic orientation means that I'm not sitting and looking at you expecting to be the expert in your life. I'm basically looking with you the same direction. We're both looking at the problem together. And I'm kind of your therapeutic Sherpa. Like I have walked similar paths with people, but I'm never going to know at exactly what pace you're ready to go at. We may have been talking about one topic for 4 sessions, and you have every right to come in on another one and say, hey, we've been talking about anxiety, but I really need to let you know what's been going on at work. I'm not going to say, that really doesn't fit the mode of what we've been talking about. You can't talk about work today. We need to talk about your anxiety, because it's all part of somebody's life experience. So person centered just meaning I'm going to dip into some other theories here and there that might be really appropriate for what that client needs. But it's always that the client is the expert in their life. I really like person centered theory too, because it says that clients ultimately do have what they need. It's not that they are broken or missing anything. We talk about peeling the onion in therapy a lot, peel back those really thin layers over time to really discover that, yeah, they do have what they need within them. They just didn't have access to it, or previous life experiences had created patterns that really, really worked in the times that they needed, but may not be working for them as well in this moment.
That's pretty amazing. And I am a big believer in that, where, we have the answers within us, but sometimes we just need help getting to them. From your perspective, I'm curious, because I just love the person-centered approach. How does self-compassion play into that? We talk about self-compassion a lot on this podcast, and I'm wondering, especially when it's up to the client to sort of lead and say, what to focus on, and they're kind of uncovering their own layers in regard to the onion, right? Where does self-compassion come in?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, first of all, if Dr. Kristen Neff ever happens to be listening to this podcast, I am a Dr. Kristen Neff complete stan. I think she is amazing. And I reference her work all of the time. So that is, for anyone who doesn't know, that's her life's work, is doing work in self-compassion. Interestingly, part of Dr. Neff's work is what led me to do more with IFS. So I'll talk about that in just a second. But I would say from the person-centered approach, I do maybe more therapeutic self-disclosure when it is warranted than people who use other theories such as psychoanalysis or something. So when it comes to self-compassion, I mean, it's work that comes up with, I would say, probably 90% of my clients, that we are so much, oftentimes, we're so much easier on other people than we are on ourselves. So we're kind of peeling that onion back to determine, why is that? Am I a formerly gifted kid who was told that I could do anything I wanted, and so nothing ever seemed like it's enough? Is there some voice from my previous interactions with people, a family member, a teacher, that told me that I wasn't good enough? Do we need to go back and kind of undo that? So first of all, we're kind of learning where that comes from. Am I just a really high achiever that really values doing things well? And I also need to learn what good enough is. That's some of my own personal work. Self-disclosure there. Got to learn what good enough is, because we can't be perfect at everything all the time. Dr. Neff on her website has a lot of pre-recorded things that I refer clients to a lot. And it is such a great website, because most of these are free. And then if they want to do deeper work, they can pay for some of her paid resources, but she provides so much for free. I believe it's a guided meditation, or it may be one of the ones that's written out, but kind of talking about, would you talk to a friend in the way that you're talking to yourself? Or would you talk to a cherished child in your life in the way that you're talking? If you're telling yourself, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have bought that ice cream. I don't have any self-control when it comes to ice cream. I don't need to put any more weight on. People get so about body image, voice in their head. And if my best friend is with me, am I going to tell her, you don't need that ice cream, girl? No, I am never. I'm going to be like, yes, you love ice cream. You are a queen. You deserve to have this ice cream. But we don't always talk to ourselves like that. Am I going to look at a 6-year-old and say, oh, you don't need that ice cream because you're going to gain weight? Never. I would never do that. So that's a really good kind of checkpoint to go. Maybe I don't need to be talking to myself like that either. And actually, that particular activity from Dr. Neff is what led me into some IFS work. And it's been, like I said, just magical. That's work that I am doing in my own therapy with my own therapist right now, too, who is just a magician. She's fantastic.
That's amazing. And you said something about like, we can't be perfect all the time and having to learn when, like, good enough. What is that for each person? I'm sure it varies per person.
Absolutely.
But when you say that, it makes me think about, at least in coaching, I've seen a lot of people who struggle with perfectionism, and that seems to add a lot of pressure to day to day, which then increases their stress. And, I know nowadays, especially like stress, anxiety, like just seems to be unprecedented levels of people struggling. And I'm curious from your perspective, are there practical tips or things that we could do to manage those everyday stressors?
Oh my gosh. I would say there's like multiple different buckets we could dip into here. The first one that came to mind was it comes from a little bit more of a ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy mindset to kind of really focus on value. So if I'm thinking what is good enough, I might do there's several different value sort activities out there. So I might have a client do a value sort or even checking in with myself. I might do a value sort and go, what are some of those top values that I am trying to live out? There are some that we could do a value sort over 20 years, and that value would remain one of our top 10 over the 20 years. And then depending on different life phases, some of them are going to change just slightly here and there. So if I'm looking at things that are valuable, if family is a top value for me and occupation maybe doesn't fall in my top 10, then I need to be thinking if I am always trying to be perfect in my occupation, is that allowing me the space to really live my value of valuing family really high? It is so common that somebody has occupation and family. If they are somebody that is doing something that is giving back to the world in some sort of paid or unpaid occupation, that can be a really hard thing to balance. How do I balance or personal life, friends, whatever those important connections are outside of our occupation? That is a hard thing to balance. But looking at our values sometimes can help us to sort where should that energy for that highest performance go. And it allows us some space to, I don't want to say let go of, but to prioritize some of the things, like peacefully prioritize some of the things a little bit less, because I can go back to, guess what? That's not one of my top values. Everything can't be a top value for me.
That is a big one. And I can't even begin to tell you how many times where I'll start talking about somebody about core values, even just the name core happiness came from core values. And I can't even tell you how many times people will sit down and start talking about core values. And this is what I value. But then when I look at where I'm spending my time, it's not at all on the areas that I value. And that's the first aha moment of like, well, no wonder I'm so stressed or struggling. It's because the things that I care about, I'm not really devoting that time and energy towards.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I know too, like when we talk about stress, I talk a lot about daily stressors because I think we just in general, everyone has a level of stress that they're dealing with day to day. But I feel like lately there's been a lot of talk about anxiety, and some people think that it's the same. So I was wondering, can you talk us through the key differences between stress and anxiety?
Oh, yeah. This is a tricky one. And I think it's a really important designation. So I would even add stress, anxiety, and fear, because fear is going to be a different emotion coming from different sources than anxiety, than stress. There are so many things in our world that can bring about stress that if we get to step away from them for even a brief amount of time, we can find that we don't have the intense experience of that, versus anxiety sometimes can be harder to step away from if we can still experience the anxiety even if we have a chance to step away from some of the stressors for a short amount of time. This is a perfect example. I had the opportunity to go visit some family in the middle southern part of the state where there is not very good connectivity. And there's a part of me in my occupational life that felt really stressed about that. It's like, what if my clients see me? And I did a lot of planning for this. Hey, I'm probably not going to have a lot of connection. What are your options? Who would you reach out to if you can't get a hold of me for these 2 days? It was honestly a really valuable and lovely experience because where do a lot of our stressors come from in the Western developed world? For lots of us, it's coming from occupational stress. It's coming from family stress. It's coming from being bombarded with news and social media and all of these different things. I mean, if we really looked at it, what percentage of our day? A gigantic percentage. And so I would say my stress, even though thinking about coming back to work after being gone, stress like maybe went up a little bit, just like, oh, I'm gonna have to catch up with something. But in those moments where I got to set, I felt much lower stress. And that was a really interesting activity for me to do because I can't think of the last time that I had like that little connectivity. So it allowed me to kind of set some of that stress aside. As far as thinking about anxiety, I would say for a lot of people, anxiety comes from kind of a predicting mentality. So we're thinking, what am I going to do when this thing happens? How am I going to handle this? It could be short term. It could be long term. It could be, oh my gosh, I'm looking at my schedule this week and gosh, this one day is really packed and I'm starting to feel kind of anxious about that. But I could be anxious about something that may never happen. I talk to my high school clients sometimes that we can do this thing called leapfrogging with anxiety, where maybe I get a lower grade on a test that I would like. And pretty soon my brain has leapfrogged ahead 5 steps. And I'm thinking, gosh, I better figure out how to put a kit together because this one lower grade is going to lead to me not getting into college and I'm not going to be able to get a job and I'm going to be houseless at some point. Oh my gosh, what a huge jump from I got a little bit lower grade to I'm going to not be able to pay for basic living. And then, fear, I think fear is that amygdala response that there's a threat to us. There's a significant threat to bodily harm, safety. Some of us, jumping back and forth between these three categories, some of us, if we have had trauma or if we have really high anxiety can come with trauma, but we can get that kind of amygdala, I call it lid flipping with kids, with that idea that our amygdala has flipped on. Our conscious thought process is not as accessible in that moment because we're very reactive. We can have that lid flipping process or that amygdala turn on as a result of anxiety as well. And some people get really confused about that. I talk about being chased by the bear a lot in here. If I'm being chased by a bear, I want my amygdala to flip on. I want to be very reactive. I want to be doing things before I even have time to think about how far away is the bear? Where do I need to run? Like, I just want my body to react. It's less helpful for my body to react like that if there is not a threat to bodily harm. If it's just higher anxiety, I'm probably going to benefit from being able to retain some of those more cognitive processes of being able to think through things and make decisions and decide what is really important in this moment, what's not. So it's a really tough designation, I think, to separate out stress, anxiety, and fear because they can overlap in really interesting ways for lots of people.
You mentioned too, just kind of like the anxiety attack and like that type of thing and like where you feel it in your body. And I'm wondering, are there signs or symptoms to know when you're experiencing anxiety over maybe fear or stress?
Yeah. So one pretty tangible example of like having some type of amygdala reaction that I give for clients that are of driving age is, have you ever had somebody cut you off and like you think they're going to like clip your car or run you off the road? What does that feel like in your body? Because it's going to feel different for everybody. And this might be a time that I give a therapeutic self-disclosure where I say, for me, I get this huge cold feeling, dump feeling in my upper chest, which I would assume are some of those stress chemicals, adrenaline, probably. That's what that feels like in my body. I know from experience, if I've had a huge adrenaline dump, I'm going to get a little bit shaky. My breath is going to speed up. I might feel like my heart's racing. That is actually a purpose of adrenaline. Adrenaline is supposed to speed up our heart rate. It's supposed to increase our respiration rate so that we could take off running and run faster or longer if we needed to. If you're being chased by the bear, we want to be able to do those kind of superhuman things. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily need a huge adrenaline dump if somebody just about cuts me off, but the adrenaline dump does allow me. I'm not thinking, I better put my foot on the brake. I've already done that before conscious thought takes over. So that is one benefit of kind of that amygdala, that lid flipping idea of like, I've already reacted before I've had a chance to think. So I'll talk to clients about what did that feel like for you? If you're driving and somebody just about runs you off the road, what does that feel like for you? Some clients are coming in and I will say, do you know what a panic attack is? Do you think you've ever had one? Sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And so we're talking about the difference. And again, I might give a therapeutic self-disclosure of, for me, having higher anxiety feels like more muscle tension. It's hard to get my shoulders to relax. I might feel some chest tightness. For me, having a panic attack feels very different than that. And I'll give some examples of, other clients have talked about panic attacks can feel like you're dizzy. It can feel like you want to run away. And even if there's no stimulus, you just want to run away. It can feel like you're about to crawl out of your skin. It can feel like you're going to throw up. It can feel like you're going to pass out. It can feel like your heart's about to beat out of your chest, or that you might think that you're having some type of medical emergency because it feels hard to breathe all of a sudden. And so helping clients to kind of determine, I'm never going to tell somebody what a panic attack feels like in their body. I might give some examples, but often just giving a little bit of information, somebody goes, oh yeah, you know what? I think I have had one now that you say that. And here's what it felt like for me. Or, when you talked about that experience of anxiety, I feel more like that. It feels kind of like a longer term, just kind of a tension, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something bad's going to happen, that kind of feeling.
I'm actually glad that you made that distinction. I noticed I usually it's when I don't even realize that I'm anxious until I look down in my body and I'm like, oh, I'm so tense. Or with my hands in my, I'll realize that I have a little bit of a fist. I'm like, well, why? Where does this come from? And then I have to kind of just relax myself and think about, am I anxious about anything at this moment? It's very interesting. I've also had panic attacks, which are just full on attacks where you shortness of breath, heart beating so fast, like what is going on? Yeah. I'm curious though, just following up on that, for someone who is having the panic attack or anxiety attack or something at that moment, what would you suggest that someone try when they are in the midst of having an attack?
So one of the first things I do with most clients is talk about the 5 types of coping skills. Again, just giving some scaffolding. So there are calming skills. So that could be breathing, that could be meditation, yoga, anything that has a calming effect. There are thinking skills. So that's some of our more like CBT type techniques. I think actually ISS can fit into that a little bit too when we're thinking what parts. Now we're maybe doing some gratitude practice of, trying to think about at the end of the day. I tell my clients, you can be mad at me when you do your gratitude practice and it will still work. Like it's okay. As long as you're trying to bring your brain to what went well, we're doing the work of overriding that natural negativity. Movement is another family of coping skills. So for some people, in whatever way they're able to access movement, if they are able to, that can be a really helpful one. But again, we're not acting like everybody can access movement in the same ways for lots of reasons. There's connectivity skills. So being able to connect to other humans. I think that especially the pandemic taught us that connection does not have to be in person, that we can have our internet friends, we can have our gaming friends, and those are still really, really valid for connectivity. And then the final one is distraction. And I always tell clients, like, you may never have heard that distraction is actually a coping skill. It is. I don't ever want my clients to that's the only one that they rely on, but we all use it to some degree. So we're going to do the scaffolding there with every client. I treat coping skills. They are kind of an adjunct to therapy, and it's an experiment. And I tell them that I'm going to give you 1 or 2. I want you to try them out. I want you to also be trying them at a time that you're not immediately feeling that need. So maybe we're working on a sensory technique. I want you to maybe integrate it in with bedtime or with brushing your teeth or sometime that you're going to be able to remember and that you're already feeling kind of calm. I think one misnomer with coping skills is you teach somebody a breathing technique and they're only trying to access it in the middle of a panic attack and they never do it any other time. Your brain's going to start associating that breathing technique with not feeling very well because you're doing it at a time that you don't feel good. So if you practice that at a time that you feel really calm, your brain is much more likely to be able to access that calm. And remember, the last time I did this, I felt really nice because I was cozy, I was in my bed, I felt safe. So I tell clients too, if therapy was all about coping skills, you wouldn't need me. I wouldn't have a job because you could YouTube this, you could buy a book. There's all kinds of things you could do. So I will give clients a coping skill. I'll say, go home and try this, report back. Was it awesome? Did it work in this instance, but not this instance? Because we all start to develop this toolbox. Again, I give a personal disclosure when appropriate, but I'll give the example of during one of my pregnancies, I had a pretty high stress appointment coming up. I know that humming or singing, for a variety of reasons, for the vibrations internally, there's some theory there that says if we vibrate stuff right around our vocal cord and the vagus nerve and all of that, that we can get some relief. It's also a distraction for me. So I'm driving to this appointment in the car by myself. I'm singing, I'm feeling good. And then I'm thinking, guess what? You are about to walk into the waiting area. People are probably not going to be super happy if you continue to sing in there. So open your toolbox back up. What other tool do you have that you can use once you get inside this? So just some tangible things of all of the breathing techniques out there. I remember there has been a time when I was really suffering with panic. And the thought of just sitting there and breathing in and tuning into the sensations inside my body, I can even feel that sensation coming up right now because it just did not work for me. And there was a part of my brain going back to that self-compassion that was not being very self-compassionate because I would say to myself, if you can't even get this to work, you are so sick. Nothing's going to work. It was very negative. What I didn't realize at that time was I needed something that was more external, a more external coping skill than an internal, because I needed to be able to step away from some of those internal sensations. That can be true for clients that have had trauma. Sometimes they need to be able to step outside of themselves, away from the internal sensations to be able to kind of mitigate some of those feelings. It can be true of neurodivergent clients that struggle with that interoception or like being able to understand either where our body is in space or being able to identify different sensations. Sometimes people really struggle with identifying those things. So do I teach breathing techniques? Yes. One of my favorite ones is called 4-7-8 breathing. It combines calming, but it also combines distraction. So anytime we can combine two or more of those categories, we get sometimes more bang for our buck on coping skills. So 4-7-8 breathing is breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, breathe out your mouth for a count of 8. Now, the very first time I tried this, I know people listening to the podcast are not going to be able to see this, but I had my mouth open, just relaxed, and I breathed out. And when you do that, the air comes out really fast. And so I was not able to breathe out for a count of 8. What I learned was if I pursed my lips, almost like you're letting air out of a balloon, I can let the air out a lot slower. Really, the crux of this one, and I tell clients this too, is if you can't hold it for 7, that's okay. Work up to it. If you can't breathe out for 8, that's okay. Work up to it. What we're trying to achieve is that you're breathing out longer than you're breathing. Because if the bear is chasing you, your cognitive thought process is out the window and you're not going to be thinking about breathing out longer. In fact, we want to be breathing in and out very quickly so that we can oxygen our body so that we can run away really, really fast. So if you're breathing out for longer than you're breathing in, it's one of those ways that we can kind of trip our brain into going, oh, they must be safe. Maybe I can kind of turn on that rest and digest, that parasympathetic reaction that says, okay, we can stop dumping all the stress hormone. We can slow down breathing, slow down heart rate, and we can start to kind of recuperate from that big stress chemical dump. So 4-7-8 breathing can be really helpful. It actually has some research basis that it is one of the more effective to help people fall asleep. So I always encourage clients to try that one, 4 or 5 rounds of it at bedtime. You may find that you're falling asleep better. And then you can also use it when you need to, once you've kind of gotten that pattern. But truly, one of my favorite types of coping skills to teach clients is anything that has to do with involving our senses. So one of the really easy ones is just called I notice. So I'm looking out the window of my office right here, and I actually do notice it looks like the house across the street did some yard work and they added some really colorful flowers over the weekend. And that's new. That happens to be a beautiful one that I'm looking at, and I'm using the senses of my eyes to see the bright colors over there. It does make me a little bit happy to see these pretty colors. It doesn't have to be something that's beautiful. It could be, oh, I'm driving to work today and I'm noticing it must be trash day. Everybody's got their trash bins out. Oh, I'm noticing that there's some road work up ahead that there wasn't last week. When I'm noticing using my senses, it could be I'm smelling something right now. It could be I'm seeing something. It could be I grab onto my shirt. I'm wearing a real lightweight kind of fluffy shirt today and I'm feeling what that texture feels like. I've got some pillows in my office that have some variety of textures on purpose because clients will touch those and I'll say, notice the difference between the texture of that fuzzy part and that smooth part. I want you to feel it with your fingers and I want you to record. How would you, even if you had your eyes closed, how would you know you were touching those two different parts? When we are asking our sensory system to tune in the moment, it's again one of those things that can turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. Because if I was being chased by a bear, afterwards I might remember some sensory details, but I'm not really able to tune in that moment. A third one that I find a lot of clients have a lot of success with, and we will do some expressive things. This one can be used for all ages. So some people, I just have them come up with a visual picture. Some people will draw it out. Now, I do check in with clients because not everybody has access to being able to draw up a visual picture in their brain. So sometimes we will use a tool like we'll go online. If they can't pull up a picture on their brain because that's not how their brain functions, we'll go online and we'll find an image of something. So it's called calm, safe space. Clients are trying to think of the calmest, safest space they can imagine. That can be real life. That can be someplace they have access to right now. That can be someplace they've been on vacation. It can be a scene from a movie. It can be something from a book. It can be something really fanciful that they just make up. But they're trying to access this image. So they may pull one up and look at it. They might draw it out, or they might be seeing it in their brain. And then I say we pretend we're putting on VR goggles. I want you to look forward. I want you to look to the side, to the other side. We're creating this visual kind of image of where we are. So when I give an example is like a seascape. So I'm looking out over the ocean. I'm thinking not just, oh yeah, it's an ocean, there's water. I'm thinking, what color is the water today? Are there waves? Are there big waves? Are there small waves? Are there any boats out there? Are there birds? I'm thinking of all the details. What does the sky look like? Are there clouds? Is it gray? Is it blue? Where's the sun at in the sky? If I don't have that ability to pull up the visual image in my head and I'm looking at a picture, I'm noticing those things. So once we get the visual picture, we're thinking of all the other senses. So I'm thinking, what's the feeling here? Am I in a low beach chair where I can reach down and drag my fingers over sand? Am I under an umbrella? Is the sun baking down on me? Is it coming from the side? Is there a breeze? Is it cold? Is it warm? So we're thinking about scent. In my own personal one, I tell clients, I always imagine that there's a food truck that's like a way down the beach and it's making funnel cakes. And every so often I get this nice little waft of funnel cakes and I got this salty ocean air, and we're thinking through all of those things. I think that one can really help because if we're thinking that deeply about sensory experience in the present, that's kind of a mindful practice that I'm not able to get into. We talked about the stress or the anxiety of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next week when? If I'm tuning into the sensory experience, I am staying very present focused. I could do this also outside. I wouldn't have to go to the calm safe space if I didn't want to. I could just do it wherever I am. But for some clients, if they're experiencing, let's say, somebody who's experiencing stress at school, stress at work, and that particular environment doesn't feel like accessing the sensory stuff helps to calm them because that environment feels stressful, they can always tap into that calm safe space.
Those are all amazing. And when you said that, I actually had another aha because for me, it's going out into nature. Nature is the place where I do tap into more of the sensory experiences. And
Wow.
it was always just a thing where it's like, get out in nature, it's grounding. But I just realized as you were talking through that it is really about the sensory experience.
Yeah.
And I really do pay attention to the birds and the trees and the leaves on the trees. And I get, just very hyper focused on what's happening and then how nature's all working together and like how the birds and the squirrels are playing together. But it's very interesting. And I never really put those together. But that's kind of like the calm place for me and why I like being out in nature is because of that.
Yeah, that is one that I personally tap into a lot too. And so I can relate to you on that.
And then you actually said something with coping skills. You talked about there being the distraction, but then also social. And the thing that popped into my head is I think that a lot of times, especially because of technology and especially with social media, we think we're being social, but then we're also tapping into that distraction. And it seems like our phones, maybe just our phones in general, but more specifically social media, seems to be a double-edged sword, right? Like it's like we go when we're feeling stressed and we want to just watch a cat video, see a meme, something happy or makes you laugh, or we're sending something to a friend. But then at the same time, we also can get stressed. It can trigger anxiety.
Absolutely. Well, and I have clients really tune into like before you jumped on social media, if you can, think about why you're using it. Now, I'm totally a phone scroller, so I'm not telling people like not to scroll. And I use that for a variety of reasons. And 100% distraction is the reason sometimes. So why are you accessing it? What are you looking at while you're on there? And then how did you feel afterwards? I've had some clients say that they find that the way that they interact with Instagram, because it is primarily picture based, they find that to be more of a connective thing. They've got it with just people that they know and they like, and they're kind of keeping up with people's lives. Now, I'm always talking with clients about, the self comparison, going back to self compassion. I laughed a while ago. My husband and I took our kids out and we were going to have this like fun day. And it just so happened that there were several things that were nobody's fault, but kind of turned into be this like stressful thing. And he was laughing, but he goes, I bet you could make this look like we had this like perfect pristine day today. And I said, you know what? I'm actually going to do that. I took a picture of what would have looked like we had this lovely day. And then I also took a picture of reality and I put that on my own personal social media of like, reality versus social media. Because if I post this one picture, it looks like our day was this way and it really wasn't. So thinking about that, when I'm working with clients on body image, we are talking a ton about curating social media. We're talking about, there are some vendors that have, I think there's still a lot of ways to go, but there are some vendors, there are some content creators that are, using models of different body sizes, of using models of different body ability. And so talking about, let's make sure that you're following some of the content creators that are really like body neutral or body positive, making sure that you're seeing a variety of body sizes and shapes and abilities and colors and all of that on your social media. So you don't start internalizing that non-self compassionate message of everybody else has it together. Nobody else has cellulite. But that is one big piece that I work with clients on, is helping to decide how they're going to, or if they're going to interact with social media. I don't get to make that decision for them, but just kind of talking through that and how do we curate that space to support their goals of becoming more accepting of what their body does for them on a day-to-day basis rather than exactly what it looks like from day to day, because that can shift so much too.
I love the idea of curating social media. And I think we forget about that sometimes also, just the fact that it's
Yeah.
so many algorithms and that we actually do have some control over what we're being shown. And I know even now it's like they have the option where it's like, see less of this, or I don't want to see,
Yeah.
like if there's something that you like to see, you can like it and you'll see more of those. But just being conscious enough to curate what makes you feel good. So when you do start to, I call it doom scrolling, and I get, because
Yeah.
I'll open and I'm like, oh, I got a message from a friend who sent me something funny. And then next thing you know, it's like, I'm just like,
Yes.
still going and there's other videos popping up. And then I'm like, wait, why did I come on here again? So I like the fact they're just being more mindful of curating the type of
Yep.
content that you want to see. And especially when it comes to comparisons and keeping in mind that, again, everybody shares the positive side of
Yeah.
their lives on social media. Nobody really shares the messy side.
Yeah.
So that's actually very, very, very helpful. I wanted to talk to you also about resilience. So a lot of what we deal with, I mean, whether it's daily stressors, whether it's anxiety, whether it's, I have to change my job, or I just got laid off, or I have to move. Like there are so many different things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis where it seems like we need to have this very consistent level of resilience, or at least a way to tap into being more resilient. And I wanted to get
Yeah.
your thoughts on just having resilience when it comes to either managing daily stressors or big life transitions.
I do think, the goal in life is not to be happy. Like, I wish that we could all be happy 100% of the time. But then when I say that, sometimes I also don't wish that, because we would recognize it as feeling as nice as it does if we felt like that all of the time. We really can get into some of those thinking practices of noticing just the moments during the day. Like I did today. Oh my gosh, the people across the street planted some really pretty flowers. Just kind of sitting with, oh man, the sun coming in my car window feels so nice right now. But noticing when things do feel pleasant, we're just noticing them. We're letting our brain sit with that for a second. For a while, especially in school counseling, there was so much focus on resiliency and grit. And I think we can kind of get into some dangerous territory there too, particularly like my experiences in life as a white, cis woman are not everyone's experience in life. I have no right to tell somebody else that they are not being gritty enough or they're not being resilient enough when I haven't lived their life. So I do think about resilience and I do focus on resilience, but I would say mainly with clients, I am focusing on like peace and contentment. So I think sometimes it comes with, listening to ourselves, knowing what has worked for ourselves in the past. Sometimes it's learning those pieces of when do I push myself and when do I not.
What would you say is a level of importance of having a good support system? Because, like you just said, your experience might be different from somebody else's experience. So, or if we're talking about resilience, then it might not line up, right? It's
Oh,
going to be very different.
yes. I think support system is so important. And I think it's really important for me to tune in with my clients about what kinds of barriers as a PMHC, a perinatal mental health certified specialist, I think our postpartum thoughts in the United States are so broken. When we think about how siloed parenting is, a lot of people don't have the village. And so we're expected to figure out how am I going to make all these freezer meals so that I have food to eat after I have this baby and I'm literally like physically wounded. And like, gosh, it would be so much better if we had the support system to help us out with like bringing us some food or throwing a load of laundry in. That's not the reality for everybody. We're really close to our Air Force base here. And I work with clients that are military. That's a really tough thing sometimes that they do not have the familial support system around, or they're still in the process of even building their military support system here because maybe they just got here. Maybe they don't live on base. And so it's really hard to connect when they know they're going to be moving in a year and a half again. So I think, thinking about how we can resource supporting each other, how can we resource achieving support, that can go back to that self-compassion thing we talked about too, because sometimes we are feeling like we don't deserve it. So I think having a support system, both for emotional stuff and even for the physical stuff sometimes. My lawnmower broke. What do I do? Do I have a neighbor that will let me borrow their lawnmower versus I have to wait 2 weeks before I can figure out how to haul it there because my lawnmower doesn't fit in my car and how I'm going to solve that problem. I think in the United States, a lot of times we value that independence and we lose sight of a lot of that, like community care that is so, so important for so much.
I was actually going to ask you that. What would you say to someone who felt like they didn't have a good support system?
Oh, yeah. This is tough. And especially, I think I always want to give people so much space that people who are dating, that is so hard. People who are trying to make new friends as adults, that is so hard. It involves banking on hope. And that's such an emotionally intense thing to bank on hope and hope that we're going to find this person we're going to connect with. And so sometimes it comes in fits and starts. I can't tell you how often it is that somebody's really trying to make new connections and they're super excited. And maybe the first interaction goes well. And then it's like, it's not quite the person that they were hoping or it doesn't work out in all the ways they hoped. And so then they need to take a break. They need to step back. They need to get off the dating site for a couple of weeks and just like take a pause and how normal that is. That like, you don't have to go all the time. I find that people probably make some of the best connections through different kinds of social activities. And it can be anything from when I moved to this area after college, I didn't know very many people. I was teaching myself how to knit and I went to this yarn store because they had really cool yarn and I was trying to like figure out, get an answer to it. And she was like, oh, we have a knitting group. So I went there and that was so cool because it was a like intergenerational group. So there were people that are a lot older than me. There were people my age. There were people from all different walks of life. And we were all there. We all had the connective piece that we got a project and we were working on it. You could get answers about your project, but people were also just talking about life. There wasn't any pressure to talk or not talk. So there are different volunteer opportunities that people find helpful sometimes around here. We've got, multiple different animal shelters. We've got things to do with kids in camps. Our art museum has a really good young adult program that you can volunteer to like plan these really cool events that we're, oh my gosh, I can even think fundraising for the art museum. And so there, just about any interest that you have, there's some type of like social group. Meetup.com is one that some people tap into. If you have special dietary needs, you have to eat gluten-free, you have to eat vegan. There's probably a meetup group that meets and goes to some of these restaurants and they're going to have people that have to eat in the same ways that you eat. And so I think there's so many ways. Some people find if they take part in faith practices that going to some type of faith organization or study group or something like that can be helpful. Book clubs, gosh, there's so many different ways to try to connect with people. I think that's one place that social media can be helpful, because if we were in the days of phone books, it'd be a lot harder to find activities than it is to kind of tap into. Oh, you know what? I am kind of into art. I'll start following the 3 art museums we have in the area. And oh my gosh, they have an activity coming up. I should go to that. I should try it out. But the bravery and the resilience that it takes to try those out, I give clients all the credit in the world, because my goodness, that can be an emotionally draining thing to say, I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to go to this activity and see how it turns out.
Yeah, I agree. And those are all great suggestions. And I think that still goes back to the self-compassion part as well, and just being compassionate for yourself in the situation when you're trying to make. So I know we are at time. Thank you so much. We are going to link to your Facebook page as well as your website. Was there anything that you wanted to share with the listeners before you go?
I think the only thing that I would throw out there is I always want people to know, as a therapist, how much that I realize it takes for people to reach out sometimes. So I am always trying to hold that so gently and with such compassion and such care, because I know even in my own life, sometimes it's taken me calling 8 different numbers. You're trying to look at all these pages. So like that can really be a barrier. I would say you don't have to show up. None of the therapists that I'm aware of, including myself, we're not expecting you to show up perfectly. We're not expecting you to have all the answers. Like, just making the connection and showing up, that's really what I'm asking for in my practice. So if you're feeling like you need to access therapy, it can be a very draining process to find the right therapist. It can be so rewarding when you do. And just know that therapy, I think, is one of the few places that in the world that you really do get to show up in whatever form you need to show up that day, and that therapists recognize that. And there are really very little expectations. And so sometimes that can take pressure off of people in thinking, I've been thinking about that, but I don't think I'm ready, or just show up. I think that's the biggest part.
That's beautiful. And I will say the lack of judgment, just going to
Yes.
a place where there's no judgment is also
Absolutely.
the important part.
Yeah.
To our Core Happiness listeners, Cara and I would love to hear from you. What part of this episode stood out to you the most? What were your main takeaways? Please feel free to reach out on social media and let us know. You can also reach Cara on her website, www.seedsofchangecc.com. And you can also reach her on Facebook at facebook.com/seedsofchangecc. I thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate it or leave a review. If you have any thoughts or questions, I would love to hear from you. You can email podcast@corehappiness.com. For show notes and additional resources, you can visit www.corehappiness.com. As always, please remember, never let anyone diminish your light. Until next time, sending you my love.